It was almost 3 p.m. The sun glared over the pier, and as the car pulled up, the tension swiftly began to rise. "You don't have the money, you get out of my car," yelled the driver angrily. This was the third or fourth time he had dealt with this particular client, and he had reached a breaking point. A distressed but masculine voice could be heard from the back seat of the car. He desperately tried to explain to Pablo why he should still be helped. "Pablo, I swear, I will find some way to pay you back when we get there. Please don't abandon me now, especially when we've already gotten this far. The end is in sight." Unfortunately, though, Pablo was already beyond the point of reasoning. Enough was enough. The passenger, Felipe, didn't have any money, so Pablo would do what he has always done with fare-dodging passengers for the past 15 years of his career. Kick them out wasn't remotely his responsibility. Pablo had kindly gotten him through the border and had also previously offered aid to Felipe and his family. Now it was time to cut ties loose. Felipe and his family, his wife Camila and their son Samuel stared blankly as Felipe drove off and accelerated long into the distance. They were now on American soil, but they owed Pablo $10,000, so they would have to continue the journey alone. The beach was lovely and picturesque, but fairly brisk due to the time of the year. Samuel started to get increasingly cold, so Camila wrapped him warm and positioned his wheelchair in a way that angled the warmer sea breeze toward him in an attempt to combat the cold. Talking to himself, he mumbled some thoughts. He didn't even realize that he was saying them aloud. "I didn't like the idea from the beginning. If I'm honest, we should have tried to find a cure for him back in our own country. Sure would have saved a pile of money." Unfortunately for Felipe, Camila had heard his mumbling and wasn't particularly pleased about it. Contentiously, she reminded him for the 50th time that they had already tried the doctors back in Afghanistan. They were great and very kind, but didn't have the necessary facilities or treatments. However, they had heard that these treatments were readily available in America, which is why they had invested so much in going there. The sheer audacity of Felipe to brush this off and complain about the chance of their son recovering was out of order. Felipe, to nobody's surprise, was depressed about this and quickly retaliated. The cracks in their relationship promptly started to deepen due to the stresses of Samuel's illness. "And look where we are now. We have no money and are stranded with our..." Raging, Felipe kicked Samuel's wheelchair, which caused it to jolt him forward, causing immense pain. Camila, much like Pablo earlier, had reached a breaking point. She understood his anger and shared the sentiment in many ways, but taking this built-up rage out on their son, who was already suffering enough, no way in hell she would let that slide. A fight began to erupt, and sensing this tension, Samuel tried his best to calm his mother down. "Don't answer him, Mom, just leave it." "But he hurt you, and I need to teach him a lesson. Nobody hurts my son." "Mom, listen to me for once, for crying out loud. Mom, listen. I hate it. I hate it when you two fight. It makes me feel even worse. So just stop." The next few days were tense. Felipe did his best to put aside the previous anger to find a place for the family to stay. After a few weeks, Felipe just about manages to get enough money to rent out a small room/attic in a nearby town. Settling in was proving difficult, but it would have to work somehow. To try and be comfortable, Samuel lies down on some cardboard and sits with his mom, staring blankly at the rotting ceiling. Felipe would have customarily joined in with this, but his anger was still circulating within him. "You never failed to keep my spirits up, but I think it would be best if I meet my end. We have tried everything feasibly possible, and continuing this endeavor is tearing you and Dad apart. I don't want to be remembered as the cause of your divorce, not after 22 years of happy marriage before I came along and ruined it when I was born." "Don't you dare say that again. This is a country of peace and prosperity. There's no corruption, and very kind-hearted and good people live here. The medicine, doctors, everything. I am 110% sure that we will find help for you. When have we ever let you down?" Deep down, she didn't want him to answer that and meant it to be rhetorical. Camila and Felipe had let Samuel down so often that it was hard to keep count these days. Before he could reply, Felipe interjected, infuriated by Samuel's comments. He never wanted to hear this again. He was determined not to give up. He had gotten into debt and traveled half across the world for nothing. He loved his son and would do anything for him. "Stop feeding him these lies, Camila. He's a grown-up already and understands the situation as clearly as day. We are both in the wrong, and as much as I hate to admit I am wrong, our son's life is at stake. Let's be realistic and sort this out, okay?" "You're a good father, Felipe. We all know that. We are a strong family, just cracked and in need of repair. I think Samuel's recovery is the perfect repair. Please, don't give up. We are close to our goal." Another long time passed, and they had finally reached a doctor's surgery. There was hope, at last, that Samuel would get better. The doctor and Camila talk for a while, but forget that Samuel is in the room. He overhears, and it upsets him because they speak depressingly. "I understand your situation. We can make some discounts for you, but you have no insurance. I have already slashed the cost of the treatment in half, but I don't know if it will be enough. $200 is the absolute best I can do. I'm doing the best that I can to help. Can I please see your documents?" Camila began to cry. "I don't have any documents." The doctor looks and sighs. "Look, I've been as upfront as possible with you. Maybe come back when you have located your documents." Little did he realize that they would have to travel hundreds of miles to find them. Camila continued to cry. Her luck had honestly run out. "Mom, don't cry. We shouldn't have come here. I will die here anyway. Now we have no money, no family at all. It's all because of me. Dad was right after all." It was a rainy and bitter New Year's Eve. The night sky was starless and dim, which wasn't typical for the area. After making a stop at a local gas station, Pablo was on a drive when he pulled into a hotel to pick up a predetermined passenger. No name was given, just the address and the time. In all the years that Pablo had been cabbing, this had never happened before, and it was very suspicious to him. A silhouette got into the car, and Pablo began to drive. A faint but familiar voice pierced through Pablo's soul. He had never expected to hear this voice again. "You killed my son." He looked around. It was Felipe in the back of the taxi. His face was crumpled but tense. You bastard. You kicked us out of the taxi at the border. We had no chance but to seek out the closest doctor, and he couldn't save him. If you had driven us a bit further, my boy would be here today." Pablo was equally angry. He had no intention of killing Samuel and was upset by the news. Unfortunately, Felipe was too far gone to acknowledge this or care. He had it in his head that Pablo had killed him, and now the $10,000 he owed him was the least of his problems. Felipe wasn't necessarily known for being violent, but he could do all sorts when he was pushed. He had known Pablo for over a decade and considered him a dear friend. A dear friend of the past, though. He could not forgive him for what he had done and could not live with himself if he let Pablo live. "You killed my son, and now he's gone. My life is dead and my wife has left me. Even if she blames you, our revenge was the last thing we agreed on. You will never see that $10,000 we owe you. You will never see the light of day again. End of the road, Pablo. Wasn't friendly knowing you."
Mom is no longer with us. Catherine heard her father's quiet, confused voice. He stood perplexed, with the phone in his hand, looking at Catherine with a devastated look. Daddy, what's wrong? Please tell me." Catherine was shaking her father's hand, and the wild fear of tragedy shackled the whole body of the 15-year-old girl. "Your mother died during childbirth," the father replied, stammering and barely holding back tears. Unbearable pain squeezed the girl's heart. Just yesterday, they were discussing the name of the future baby with Mom and Dad. Catherine had pressed her hands and cheek against her mother's stomach and listened to her sister move. And at night, her mother was taken by ambulance to the maternity hospital with contractions. Catherine hardly slept the rest of the night, waiting for the joyful news and imagining what her little sister would be like. Catherine didn't want to believe what she had heard. Shock, fear, indignation, and misunderstanding overwhelmed the girl. No, no, no! She felt as if everything inside her screamed. Acceptance began to come to her gradually. Grief gripped the family. Catherine and Dad hugged each other tightly and cried bitterly. A few days later, the baby was discharged from the hospital. Our Mirabelle, Catherine and her father spoke at the same time. Mirabelle was the name they all chose together on the eve of her mother's unexpected. Dad and Catherine brought little Mirabelle home and put her in a crib. The baby girl yawned and smiled sleepily, as if to show that everything will be fine. I am your Mirabelle. Catherine quickly matured because now she was taking the place of Mirabelle's mother. Catherine took full care of her sister. Little Mirabelle was happiness and joy for their family, and 5 years later, another tragedy came to their house. Dad was gone. Everything reminded Catherine of her former happiness, about her carefree childhood while her mother was alive, about how she and Dad raised Mirabelle together. But Catherine also could not forget all these tragic events that took place in her home and in her family. Mirabelle, you're going to school soon, Catherine said. What city would you like to study in? In a big, beautiful one, so that there was a river and a zoo, a skating rink, and even carousels, Mirabelle listed, bending her small fingers to count. Catherine hugged the girl and realized which city they would move to the place where happiness awaits them. The evening in the Smith family passed as usual. The head of the family, George, while waiting for dinner, aimlessly clicked the buttons on the TV remote and scolded without malice that there were more and more channels, and there was simply nothing to watch with pleasure. Elizabeth, along with her 12-year-old daughter Emma, cooked simple but very tasty dishes. Remember, daughter, when you mash the potatoes a little, then add milk, be sure to warm it up at the beginning. I know, Mom, you've already told me that 1,000 times. We also need to make sure that the foam does not get there. The girl charmingly wrinkled her nose, showing her attitude to this product. Do not worry, it is simply impossible to forget your science. George and Elizabeth's eldest son, Danny, 25, was also in the kitchen, having returned to his father's house after a short marriage of 3 months. He was slicing vegetables for a salad and thought how lucky he was with his family after all. How could he have imagined that his wife Lily, who claimed her faithful love, was so easy and simple to cheat on him? Parting with his wife greatly affected the guy's ego. His ex-wife reproached him for financial insolvency and lack of activity in the performance of marital duty. In general, the only joy in this difficult situation for Danny was the fact that his relatives did not get on his nerves, and they just didn't think about Lily, as if she didn't exist. Finally, Elizabeth, together with the children, cooked all the dishes, and the whole family traditionally sat down at the table. Between mashed potatoes and salad, the son announced to his parents that he would celebrate New Year's Eve, not at home, but with his former classmates. Harry got divorced too. Invited Andrew, Serge, and me, in general, our entire male company, both housewarming and celebrating the new year at once. The news did not come as a surprise to parents. After all, they understood perfectly well that their son had grown up a long time ago. And besides, all the guys listed were well known to them. Andrew, Serge, and Harry met Danny at school, and surprisingly, time did not affect their friendship too much. They studied together at the same institute. And Harry and Andrew even worked together, and Elizabeth and George, without collusion, thought that an evening with old friends would help him unwind. "Say hello to all the guys for us," Danny's mom smiled tenderly, and in general invited them to sit with us sometime. "I haven't seen them for a long time. I missed them." "That's right, son. We'll get your console from the mezzanine, and we'll play like before." George got the idea of his wife. Emma tried to ask Danny to come to Harry's New Year's celebration, but received a firm and terse refusal from her brother. "Don't even think about it." The month remaining before the holiday flew by unnoticed. After congratulating his parents and sister on the upcoming, Danny got ready to visit a friend. In one hand, the guy had a bulky bag with groceries that he had bought on the table, and in the other, with Mom's salties. With all the supplies, he went to Harry. Because of the terrible ice, the sidewalk looked more like an ice rink. And Danny saw how, almost at the very entrance to a friend's house, a girl fell backwards, absurdly waving her hands with packages. Approaching her, he put down his bags and helped her get up and collect the rolled tangerines. "Oh, thank you very much," the stranger thanked him. "I don't understand how she managed to fall." The girl only looked straight into Danny's eyes for a few seconds, but he felt a warm and pleasant feeling in his heart. "Absolutely not at all. It's so slippery here." And the guy hurried to pick up his bags, because his plans did not include a new novel at all. However, it turned out that both he and the stranger go to the same entrance. The girl, after a little hesitation, still entered the elevator with Danny. They almost said in unison, "I'm on the 4th." It was impossible not to smile. And the girl asked, "Are you going to Harry's by any chance?" "Yes, this is an old friend of mine." Dima really liked the gray eyes of the traveling companion and the cute dimples appearing on her cheeks and the minimal amount of cosmetics which his ex-wife was so fond of. "I have agreed to celebrate the New Year with him. Are you going to celebrate with him too?" "No, I live next door to him." A short conversation was interrupted with the opening of the elevator, and Danny decided to introduce himself for some reason. My name is Daniel." "Catherine," the girl answered, and opened the door with her key, letting her companion inside and showing that Harry lived here. "I wish you all the best and Happy New Year." Danny knocked on the door of Harry's apartment and soon found himself among loyal friends. "Oh, what a surprise, Danny," Harry yelled with joy. "Didn't we lock the door here?" "No, your neighbor let me in, Catherine." "Good girl," the landlord immediately responded and added, "It's a pity that the girl is a little harsh." Andrew and Serge's friendly laughter erupted immediately. "Has she already turned you down? Did you not appreciate the unearthly beauty and cosmic charm?" In a noisy atmosphere of mutual jokes, friends saw off the old year, and the apartment continued to be filled with new guests. Harry explained to his friends that he had also invited his colleagues, who had nowhere to celebrate the holiday. As a result, the company turned out to be twice as large as planned. Instead of friendly gatherings of 4, 10 people gathered. The atmosphere, despite the fact that many were strangers, was cheerful. But there were problems with the furniture. A sofa and 2 chairs were available, but there were not enough seats at the table. And Harry turned to Danny. "Listen, friend, can you go to the neighbor and ask for chairs? And then we have some kind of buffet, turns out." Danny was surprised to realize that he was as worried as before a date when he knocked on Catherine's door. A pretty girl in a simple but surprisingly suitable dress opened the door for him without asking who came. And from behind, with enthusiastic cries, a girl of about 6 jumped out with huge bows fluttering over pigtails like exotic pink butterflies. "Mommy, Catherine!" "Hooray! Santa Claus has come!" "No, Mirabelle, it's not him," Catherine replied. "It's Daniel, a friend of our neighbor." Excuse me, can you help out with the chairs?" Danny was a little surprised that a noticeably young girl as Catherine seemed to him had such an adult daughter. "Harry, it seems, called the whole city to him," he said, trying to make an awkward joke. "I imagine," Catherine said. "Of course, I'll help you out. Mirabelle and I are celebrating together today. We're not waiting for anyone, so we'll sit on the couch." In the kitchen, there was an appetizing aroma of vanilla. He didn't even really want to go back to his friend's apartment. However, he took the offered chairs and with regret left the girl he liked so much. The fun was in full swing, but Danny was uneasy. He wanted to look into Catherine's eyes again, and even the girl's daughter didn't bother him at all. Therefore, he gladly volunteered to walk to the nearest open supermarket when it turned out that Andrew had forgotten to buy water and tonic, which the ladies from Harry's work who came to the party erratically asked for. "Come on, Andrew, I'll walk with you, otherwise it will be hard to bring." And there was ice on the street, Danny said, and he remembered how he met Catherine. Even in the store, he couldn't get rid of thoughts of Catherine and Mirabelle waiting for Santa Claus. He added a soft rabbit and a surprise toy, a Santa Claus hat and beard, a bar of high-quality chocolate, and a bottle of sparkling wine to the cart. Catching the surprised look on his friend's face, he explained, "I'll bring it to my neighbor for letting us use her chairs. Otherwise, I'm uncomfortable." Danny put the souvenirs for the charming Catherine and her daughter in separate gift bags, and sliding and cursing, the guys still got to their destination. Andrew brought the drinks into Harry's apartment, and Danny, wearing the attributes of a fairy tale character, knocked on the neighbor's door again. "Where is the girl who is waiting for me?" Slightly changing his voice, he asked Catherine and winked. The joyful Mirabelle looked attentively at the guest and hurriedly told him poems and in general everything that seemed important to her. She told him, "Next year I will go to school. I already got a backpack, and after the holidays, I'll go back to prep school. It's good that you came to us because Catherine doesn't believe in miracles at all for some reason." Handing the girl a well-deserved gift and waiting until she ran away to examine it, he handed a modest present to Catherine. "It's like compensation for chairs, inconveniences, and in general. We will obviously make noise and we will interfere with Mirabelle's rest." "Danny, how embarrassing. I don't even know how to thank you. Mirabelle wanted a holiday so much. As luck would have it, I didn't have much money now, and it's expensive to order Santa Claus during the new year as a fee to pay a world-class star. All you're doing today is helping me out." Tears sparkled in Catherine's eyes, and Danny hurried away. Because another minute, and he would have completely lost his head. The magical midnight in which it is customary to make a wish flashed by. Fireworks were booming, and Danny did not forget for a second about the neighbor who was so close, and, at the same time, so far away. He was trying to figure out why he was attracted to the girl. But then he gave up on everything and began to come to her after work. They took Mirabelle with them, and remembering their childhood, they went downhill, played snowballs, and just enjoyed life. The romance developed quickly, and on March 8th, Danny decided to introduce Catherine to his family. Elizabeth, having learned that her son would bring a girl to whom he wanted to propose soon, began to ask Danny, "Who is she? How old is she? Aren't you in too much of a hurry?" Danny told her everything he knew. He did not keep silent about the fact that Catherine is raising Mirabelle alone. Elizabeth tried to reason with her son that having children is not easy. She explained that he would have to build a relationship not only with the woman he loved, but also with the girl. And it's not easy, both morally and financially. Danny cut off all the lectures. "I do not care. Please don't be upset, but I'm not leaving Catherine or Mirabelle." When they first met Catherine, Danny's parents were wary about her. Elizabeth looked into the girl's face, could not drive away from herself the unpleasant thoughts that her son wanted to burden himself with raising someone else's child. Only the younger sister was childishly enthusiastic. Emma, having filled the plates with delicacies, handed Mirabelle lemonade and glasses, and immediately took the guest to her room. Danny tried to shield Catherine from Mom and Dad's questions, but when Elizabeth asked the girl to help her with the plates, George restrained him, who rushed into the kitchen by the hand, and he whispered softly, "Don't bother Mom, son." Elizabeth did not stand up for a long time, and immediately asked a direct question. "Catherine, I'm sorry, it's none of my business, but are you really only 21 years old, as my son said?" The girl, without ceasing to wipe the plates, nodded yes. And anticipating your question, I will answer. I was not married, but do not rush to draw conclusions. Mirabelle is my sister. Mom died when Mirabelle was born. My father died a year ago from a heart attack, and we moved to this city. It was too difficult for me at home, a lot of unhappy memories, and nothing kept me there. I don't tell the Cavaliers right away that Mirabelle is actually not my daughter, but my sister, because it is simply impossible to separate us. She calls me Mom, too. Anyway, I've been raising her since she was a baby. I have no one closer to me, and I understand that I do not want to communicate with them at all, and we are clearly not in the way. Elizabeth, sobbing, hugged the girl and said, I hope Danny passed this test of yours. Catherine smiled sheepishly because he had passed. I just don't know how to tell him about it. Elizabeth and Catherine returned to the table with puffy eyes, but smiling. That evening she told Danny the truth. They celebrated the next New Year already acting as a young family, and Harry was a witness at the wedding because he was charming and a good neighbor. Alice and Jack met at a nightclub. Alice went there with friends to celebrate her 18th birthday. It was her first outing into the night social life, so to speak. Before that, her parents did not allow her to visit such places, so it was a whole event for her. It was at the club that she met Jack, who was 10 years older than her. He was already an accomplished guy. He had a great job as a history teacher at the university. In addition, he was also engaged in tutoring. He had no complaints from his students, so he earned very well. Jack immediately liked a young girl who was very beautiful. He came to the club for his friend's birthday. Since he was driving, he did not drink alcohol, but he watched others with interest. He invited Alice to a slow dance, then another, and another. And at the end of the evening, the girl fell in love with her older admirer. She gave him her phone number and then waited patiently for his call for several days. They started dating, and 2 months later, Jack proposed to her. Alice's parents were against such a quick wedding. They hoped that she would graduate from university, but Alice stood her ground. They gave their blessing, taking into account that the girl promised not to drop out of school. Alice was happy. After the wedding, she moved in with her husband, who had a wonderful apartment in the downtown area of the city. She did not drop out of university and kept her promise because she graduated. She and her husband had a great relationship. Alice was just a young girl when she married him, and with him she blossomed and matured. 5 years passed, and Alice began to notice that sometimes her husband began to behave strangely. Sometimes he would come home a little tired and thoughtful, and sometimes, especially when he was late, he was in a great mood. He joked, hugged his wife, told her about his love for her. Sometimes he did not come home empty-handed. He would bring her a bouquet of flowers, then some kind of surprise, like buying a cake. His cheerful mood pleased Alice at first, but then she began to suspect something. Well, I don't know, let's follow him or something, said her friend Kate when Alice told her about her suspicions. Come on, what are you saying? I don't suspect him. I'm just like that. I feel a little uneasy, Katie. I don't know why, but I'm worried. It's like something bad is waiting for me around the corner, and I won't know anything until I stumble upon it, Alice said thoughtfully. Kate took her by the hand and looked straight into her eyes. Said, Alice, you know that you have very good intuition. That's what scares me, Alice replied. Kate squeezed her hand. Then do your best to find out the truth, no matter how bitter or sweet it is. You don't have to sit flat on your butt, honey, and then you'll regret that you missed your happiness. Better act, and Alice decided to act. With the help of her devoted friend Katie, she found a private detective who was ready to follow her husband. For a tidy sum, a man watched Jack for 2 weeks, and in the next meeting, he laid out the results of his observations in front of Alice. And she was shocked before the truth was revealed. Jack had a mistress, a very beautiful girl with a charming voice and a gorgeous figure. Jack saw her 3 or 4 times a week. They would go to a restaurant located in the VIP zone, and several times they came to the hotel, rented a room. They were there for several hours. The most shocking thing for Alice was that the girl was very young, just like she was when she met Jack. The mistress was only 18 years old and had just graduated from high school. Alice silently digested all the information. She was ready to cry, but right up to the moment when the detective told her, "The information, as I understand it, is very important to you, and I have done something else for which you will have to pay extra. In addition to these pictures on the street, I also took a series of pictures of a different nature. Of course, additional expenses were required here to ensure the confidentiality of access to the hotel room. You will have to reimburse me for monetary damages, but I thought it would be important for you. It seems I was not mistaken." Of course he was not mistaken. Alice was willing to pay any money for such evidence. Seeing Alice's enthusiasm, the detective asked for twice the amount he was going to announce, and Alice did not even raise an eyebrow. She didn't have that kind of money with her, but she transferred that amount. She knew that her husband would have questions about where she spent such an impressive amount, but she would come up with something. She would say that she had paid a fee for an expensive fur coat. This would convince Jack. As soon as the money was transferred to the detective, he handed her a hefty envelope and a flash drive with a satisfied face. All of the information, both photos and videos, is on a flash drive. But, for convenience, I also printed everything in paper form. I hope you were satisfied with my work. If you ever need my help, then I am ready to do anything for you. You see, everything, not just a detective investigation. Hints that the detective could perform not only legitimate operations caused Alice a feeling of disgust, but she was even more disgusted by the pictures of Jack's meetings with his mistress, whose name was Emerald. Even her name was beautiful, and the photos showed the smallest details. Yes, she should have shown more gratitude to the detective. He spared no expense on the equipment. The faces were clear, and the photos were from different angles. Half of the pictures were taken near, half from far away. Alice felt sick. That bastard! He seemed such a wonderful husband, but in fact, the most ordinary womanizer. And the girl! Still milk on the lips is not dry and already tumbling with other people's husbands. That snake! Kate was indignant when a friend showed her the pictures. Alice didn't say anything. She herself was in love with Jack at the age of 18. It's no wonder that this girl also got caught in his web. She cried over these photos the whole day before. Jack asked her in the evening why her eyes were so red, and Alice simply replied that she had a headache. But now the girl had no tears. She realized that Jack had trampled on her love, and she longed for revenge, but only such revenge as to destroy Jack. She needed to come up with something that would ruin his life, and then she would leave him. Thank God she had a diploma in her hands, so she will be able to get a job and support herself. It's good that her parents forced her to study. Now, look at that. And he also does tutoring. Yes, he should be kept away from decent society, Kate persisted, swearing more and more. And then Alice had an idea. Jack is tutoring, teaches at the university, and he values his reputation very much. He is quite calm about any mistakes of other people, but he carefully monitors himself. It's strange that he walks with his mistress in front of everyone, although maybe he tells everyone that this is his niece, she thought. Alice realized that a ruined reputation would be the best punishment for her husband, and she began to implement her idea. To do this, she called a detective. If he's not just doing surveillance, then he could help her. He was just the right kind of person. Unprincipled, cunning, resourceful, and she needs him. She called him. He recognized her immediately. Or maybe he wrote down the number of a generous client. Most likely it was because when he picked up the phone, his voice was very sweet and friendly. "I need your help. No, there is no need to follow anymore. No, the photos are no longer needed. I need a different kind of help. I'll tell you." And Alice told him what she needed to be done. At the end, she announced the amount she was willing to pay for this service. When she finished speaking, she heard the detective's insinuating voice. "A very generous reward. For that kind of money, I'll do anything you say." I am completely at your disposal. I need something else from you. If you get me the list of his students, it will speed up my work a lot." A cold smile appeared on Alice's face. "I will do it. You will receive the lists tomorrow." 3 days passed. Jack was humming a tune when he was driving to university. Today, he had another date with Emerald, and he figured out how to have fun today. He wanted to quickly share his idea with his young girlfriend. He had been anticipating the most pleasant evening. When he entered the auditorium, he was struck by the deep silence, surprised by the unusual behavior of the students. He began the lecture, but after 10 minutes, he realized that something unusual was happening. He began to look at the students, but most of the students were sitting with their eyes downcast. Some looked at Jack with some kind of contempt or disgust, and only a few people looked directly into his eyes. Jack got angry. "What's the matter? Is there something written on my forehead, dear? I don't understand the reason for this behavior." Everyone was silent. Then Jack turned to one of the students who was staring at him intently. "Andrew, what's the matter with you all today? What happened?" After a few seconds, the guy looked from Jack to the blackboard behind the teacher. "We're all right, Mr. Jack. Look at the board." It seemed to Jack that an eternity had passed when he finally managed to figure out who was in the photos posted on the board. When he realized that he and Emerald were in the pictures, he shuddered. How is this possible? Who did this? Why did they do it? And where did these pictures come from? He turned to the students and asked in an ominous whisper, "Who did this? Admit who did it. Otherwise, I will not allow the whole group to take the exam." Andrew replied, "Mr. Jack, honestly, it's not us. We went into the auditorium, and then these pictures were already hanging. It's not us." Jack turned back to the photographs. His face was flushed with embarrassment and fear. Emerald's parents are not aware of their relationship. No one should have known about their relationship. And if Alice finds out, it's going to be a nightmare. He didn't want to lose his wife. Jack quickly went to the board and began to tear off the pictures. A minute later, the board was empty. Jack breathed a sigh of relief, but as it turned out, he was overjoyed early. Just as he wanted to address the students to ask them not to spread about this incident, the door to the auditorium opened. "Professor Jack, you are being summoned to the dean's office." An hour later, Jack was on his way home. An unpleasant conversation with the dean, who received an envelope of pictures of Jack and Alina, disrupted lectures, a request to write on his own, too many events in 1 hour. Jack wanted to get home faster. He has already figured out what he will say to his wife. After all, this information could also reach her. As soon as he entered the apartment, he called Alice. "Darling, are you home? What happened is terrible. I'm going to tell you this now. Imagine, I was fired. This is all Hammerson's machinations, I'm sure. He's always scheming against me, so he took these photos to defile my reputation." And then Jack saw 3 suitcases standing in the hallway. He looked at them in bewilderment and then went into the kitchen. Alice was sitting at the table drinking coffee. She was calm and did not even change her face when she saw her husband. Jack looked at his wife in confusion. "And what are these suitcases, dear? Are you leaving somewhere?" Alice put her cup on the table, folded her hands in front of her, and replied, "Yes, I'm leaving." "Far away? For how long? And why didn't I know about it?" Jack continued to ask. "For a long time, for a very long time." Jack turned pale. Then he asked, "What happened? I understand nothing." Alice smiled, but there was no warmth in her smile. "Don't you understand? Strange. I knew that the situation at the university wouldn't teach you anything, so I hedged my bets. Maybe too hard, but you deserve it, right? You are such a wonderful, loyal, loving man, and you managed to be like this not only with your wife, but also with your mistress. So, since you are so loving and generous, then let everyone who respected you know about it." Jack paled even more as he said, "What did you do?" Alice spoke calmly. "I hired a detective. He was following you, and he took all these pictures. I did this so that the pictures turned out to be at the university and at the dean, But that's not all. All your students now have these photos, and I also sent them to your mistress's parents. And I have no doubt that they will not leave you alone. Her dad will be very angry, and I'm sure of it. I congratulate you, my husband. You're a star now. And yes, one more thing. I filed for divorce. Jack dropped to his knees in front of Alice. He was still thinking only about losing his wife. I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. I love you so much. This girl is to blame for everything. Alice furrowed her brows. What are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? I hate talking to you. I'm leaving. Alice got up and went out into the corridor. She dragged the suitcases into the entrance and then slammed the door with all her might. And Jack remained sitting on the floor. He was staring at one point, and his phone was not subsiding from calls and messages. The bell rang again, and Jack took out his phone and looked at the screen. Emerald was calling. He picked up the phone. Jack, my parents know all about you. This has turned into such a scandal for me. I had to admit that you are married and cannot marry me, and my father is very angry. I told him your address. I'm sorry. He's coming to you. Jack didn't say anything. He disconnected the phone and threw it against the wall with all his might. The mobile phone went silent forever, and Jack grabbed his head and ruffled his hair. He lost everything: his beloved wife, job, authority, reputation. What else was waiting for him ahead? He was afraid to imagine. Rose was always sure not to jump to conclusions. One winter evening, she was returning home a little later than usual. It was snowing softly, and the ground temperature was cold enough for the snow to stick. Rose stopped, adjusting the fur hood on her coat, and overheard a conversation at the nearby bakery. Get out of here! I'm telling you, I won't give you anything, Rose heard someone inside the bakery say. Ma'am, I haven't eaten in a couple of days. I'd like hot water and a bun. It's cold, ma'am, said another voice outside the bakery. Rose followed the voices and saw a salesman chasing an unkempt man away from the shop. The man was hunched over and quietly begging for food. Rose waited until the man, who had a disappointed look on his face, left before she stepped into the bakery. Ma'am, give me some food, she ordered. Rose bought some pastries and hot tea. She left the shop and saw the man from earlier sitting on the frozen bench. He looked at her with such gratitude. You know, he said as he drank his tea and started to warm up, you're the first person in days to help me. He continued, people are afraid of poverty, afraid to help. They avoid those who are different from them. I was rich. People would come to me and request things. But it so happened that I am here now. I'm eating the buns that you bought. So light, so kind. I see that you have had something nagging at you for a long time, but do not forget, the man winked. Everything will be fine. You helped me and did not turn away at a difficult hour, and I will help you. Don't ask how, just help me now. Rose got up from the bench. She was so warm and good. The anxiety was gone. The man smiled again and stood too. Farewell, my good fairy, and await good news for your kindness. Rose felt the man was telling the truth. Soon she understood it exactly. Congratulations, it's a boy. This was the phrase John dreamed of hearing for 10 years. He and his wife wanted a baby, but it didn't work out. Today it happened, and John was the happiest man in the world. When can I see my wife and son? He asked the nurse. You can come in now, the nurse replied. John walked into the hospital, but it felt like he had flown into it on wings of happiness and immense gratitude. Rosie, I love you very much. Thank you for giving us a son. Rose was lying on the chair, and the baby was on her chest. She was crying with happiness. John bent down to kiss his newborn son and saw that he had a birthmark shaped like a tiny hand. Rose, he said, holding the baby out toward Rose. Did you see? Of course, she smiled. He didn't know how to ask or tell his wife that the baby had a birthmark on his forehead. "There's a spot on his forehead. Is that okay?" John said. "Birthmark at birth. Did you know they are a mark from God?" "Of course I did, but I didn't think my son would have that mark," John replied. "Does it bother you?" Rose asked. John was trying to find the right words, but he was distraught. "I like it," he said finally. "It's a peculiar speck like God touched his forehead with an ink pen. The doctors say it's a very rare mark and means our son will be brilliant and capable," Rose explained. "The doctors won't say anything to make Mom feel bad," thought John, but he didn't say anything aloud. "Do you have a problem with that?" "No, it's okay. Just out of the blue somehow. You know, I don't care where the birthmark is. For me, the main thing is that he is healthy in all respects. We have dreamed of a child for so many years, so who cares if he has a birthmark or not?" Rose said. John understood that his wife was right. It's not such a terrible defect that could interfere with the child's full life. He needs time to get used to it. "I'm sorry, you're right," he said to his wife. "I was a bit surprised. I didn't care if he had a birthmark. The important thing is that he's healthy, and so are you." He kissed his wife. "I'm going home to get ready for you and our son to come home. If you need anything, tell me, and I'll bring it to you." "No, I don't need anything, thank you. Now I have everything I wanted." 3 days later, John came to pick up Rose and his son from the hospital. There were no other visitors, and they decided to invite their family over once Mom and baby adapted to the new rhythm of life. Life was flowing in a different direction. The baby required a lot of attention and effort. Rose was very tired because, at age 37, it was challenging to become a mother for the first time. John helped his wife as much as he could, and he often got up in the middle of the night to give his wife a chance to sleep. After a week of adaptation, Rose invited over her best friend, Anna, who she planned to be her son's godmother. When Anna came bearing gifts for the newborn, she was genuinely happy for a friend who had waited so long for this happy moment in life. But when she saw the boy, she was surprised. "Rosie, what's that on his forehead?" Anna asked. "It's a birthmark," Rose answered calmly. "Can't you remove it?" Anna said. "Why?" Rose was genuinely surprised. "It doesn't bother me or John." "I don't know. It's going to grow as he does and become huge." Anna was trying to find the right words. "It would be ugly, and the kids would tease him at school, you know." "No, I don't. It all depends on how he treats this birthmark. If he likes it and thinks it's unique, he won't be afraid of being teased." "I don't know. If it were my kid, I'd have it removed," Anna said. "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to remove it for him. You can't do that after all. It's not a wart. It's a birthmark. Birthmarks don't just appear on your body." Rose was offended. "Let's wait until Adam's old enough to decide what's best for him." Rose was getting angry. She didn't want to talk about it. Anna noticed it and decided to finish her visit. "I think I'll go. I have to go to the clinic, and I completely forgot." "Run, of course. I have a lot of chores to do. I have to do my chores while Adam sleeps." Her friend left, but Rose still felt nasty in her soul. Why did she worry so much about this birthmark? It was quite small and looked fine. She seemed a little weird, thought Rose, and continued her business. There was a family visit planned for the weekend. Rose and John's parents, his sibling with his wife and daughter, and Rose's sister with her husband and children were due to come. She was looking forward to their arrival. She had a great relationship with her father-in-law and her brother-in-law, and she was always delighted to see them. Rose was on good terms with her family, at least until today. On Friday, John took a day off from work to babysit while Rose went shopping and prepared treats for her family. Unlike Rose, John was not so relaxed and was not particularly happy with his family. He knew perfectly well that relatives on both sides would ask many questions about his son's appearance. Knowing his relatives and his wife well, he was sure that no one would speak with caution. Everyone could afford to say exactly what they think about their families, so he wanted to prepare his wife for possible negative comments, but did not know how to do it. Rose came back from the store with huge bags and started cooking. Adam was sleeping well, and John decided this was the right time to talk. "Rosie, are you ready for the next of kin?" "Of course. I'm looking forward to their arrival. I miss everyone, and we rarely see each other. Imagine how happy they are for us." His wife's benevolence and naivete always surprised John. He did not intend to re-educate his wife because he did not see the point. He was not sure of the effectiveness of the idea. In the morning, Rose woke at dawn. She was eager to show her little bundle of joy to the people closest to her. Rose's parents were the first to arrive. Even though they had become grandparents for the third time, they were pleased because the eldest daughter had 2 girls, so they had 2 granddaughters. Rose's father always wanted a grandson. The grandparents leaned over to his crib to see Adam sleeping peacefully as they entered the room. They immediately recoiled as if they had seen a wild animal instead of a child. "Rose, what's that on his face?" they asked. "Birthmark. Isn't it cute?" said Rose naively. The parents immediately left the room and headed for the kitchen. John was tense about the unpleasant conversation. "Can't it be removed?" asked his father. "Why?" Rose was genuinely surprised. "Why, this is a nightmare. The child has such a mess on his face." Rose was in tears. John understood his wife's condition perfectly. She wanted her family to be happy with them, but it didn't work. "It's not gross. It's God's mark, Dad," Rose cried. "Look, why couldn't he have that mark on his back or some other part of his face?" her father said. "Did I cause this?" Rose wondered again. "God blessed it. I didn't know my daughter was such a believer." Her father was surprised. "You know, Dad, when you wait so long for a baby and ask for it from a higher power, you'll believe in everything and everyone. And what is the actual problem? You do not like your grandson?" Her parents looked at each other. It was clear that they did not consider the grandson. They saw the birthmark and immediately left the nursery. "I think I like it," she said. But her father said, "Not so much. We didn't get a good look at it." "So, you got a good look at it, but not at the child?" Rose started to get excited and the doorbell rang. Her sister and her husband and 2 daughters arrived. The girls were young, one 8 years old and the other 7. They immediately ran to look at their new cousin. No one told them he was so small and not to scream. Naturally, they woke Adam with their screams. John gestured to Rose that she should tend to the guests and that he would look after his son. Rose met her sister, who congratulated her younger sister on the long-awaited arrival of an heir and went to the nursery. She came out exactly 2 minutes later with the same look. Rose was getting angry. "I don't understand why you're unhappy. It's my kid, with or without birthmark. I don't care. I love him. I've waited 10 long years for him, and for John and me, the most important thing is that he's healthy." John's parents and brother and family came. First they hugged, they congratulated the young parents on the birth of their son, and then went to the nursery and rushed out of there, saying they did not want to wake the sleeping baby. But Rose saw that these cousins didn't like the mark on the baby's face either. John knew it was time to get into the conversation before his wife had a nervous breakdown. The family was in the kitchen, and the kids were sent to Rose and John's room, so the adults could talk privately. The family meeting was complete. "My dear family," said John solemnly, "we understand that you were surprised by the appearance of our son. Yeah, the guy has a birthmark on his forehead, but firstly, it's a tiny birthmark, and secondly, it's not a physical defect that could prevent him from fully living and developing. We sincerely do not understand your reaction and ask you to keep your emotions, especially your comments, to yourself." Everyone looked at John silently. Rose looked at her husband with great gratitude. John's father was the first to break the silence. "Guys, we're happy for you. We just didn't expect the boy to be born." He was thinking about how to word it. "To be born special." "Dad, a special baby is different. So that you know, Adam was born entirely healthy. Let's just change the subject. Well, not unique, not like the others. Can you do plastic surgery to eliminate this defect? And then John lost his nerve. What defect? He shouted. I told you it's not a defect, just a birthmark. You have that on your back and your arm. Why didn't you do any plastic surgery? Fix these defects. So it's on his back and hand, not on his face. His father doesn't want to give up. I have a cosmetologist I know. I will talk to her and find out what can be done. Rose couldn't take it anymore. That's it. I've had enough. Thank you all so much for the congratulations and the gifts, but that's it. We realized that you aren't pleased with his arrival. I am tired and I want to relax. Goodbye, she said and turned around and went to the nursery. John sent the guests away and went to his wife. Rose, of course, was crying, sitting by her son's crib. Honey, don't listen to them. We'll see how happy they are with our Adam's achievements. John tried to calm his wife. You know, I wish we hadn't invited them and kept them away from the baby. We've spoiled the mood. She leaned down to her crib and quietly said to her son, I know for a fact that you're going to show everyone how smart you are, and they're going to be embarrassed by their poor attitude. Time passed, and Adam grew up. At age 15, he graduated as an extern and entered university. He knew 6 foreign languages, was a professional swimmer, and was the winner of many sports competitions and intellectual quizzes. His parents were happy. His whole extended family watched Adam's achievements with surprise. But the most exciting thing is that the birthmark on the boy's forehead, which so concerned all the relatives, remained tiny and was almost unnoticed under his haircut as he grew up. The story of Adam resembled the tale of the ugly duckling, and the result was the same. Now grandparents on both sides praised their only grandson and were proud of his success. John's parents were doubly pleased because the boy had carried on their family name. John and Rose looked at their loved ones and wondered how they could be such hypocrites. Now, not only did Adam's birthmark not alienate his kin, but it did draw attention to him. They didn't think they were like everyone else, so they told their parents to get rid of the mark. Adam is 16 years old today. Rose and John have decided not to have a sit-down with relatives, but to take the child they had long dreamed of to San Francisco. Sitting on the plane, John asked Adam if he regretted that his parents had not given him a real family celebration. Dad, my family is you and Mom. It is clear that there are grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, but I am more comfortable with you. I am fortunate that you were like that. Other kids have a complicated relationship with their parents and often complain about misunderstanding their relatives, Adam said. Yes, they unfortunately don't choose their family, John said thoughtfully. But it's not worth giving them up, my family. Rose looked at her son with adoration. After all, he is a brilliant child. Of course, my good man, I agree with you. This is your party, and you decide how it's going to be. And Dad and I will always be there for you. And we will always be there for you because parents have to support and protect their children in all situations. She thought for a second and went on. And from any attack. And said relatively quietly, even from close relatives. This was the second time little Hope had been betrayed, tossed aside and unwanted. It was her own mother the first time it happened. What could a newborn baby do that was so wrong? Why was a healthy baby girl in an orphanage? Miss Ruth was the nanny of the orphanage, and even she could not justify what Hope's mother had done. Although Hope never experienced true parental love, she continued to hope that everything would get better in her life. Like everyone else in the orphanage, she dreamed that someday she would be loved and adopted into a nice family. She imagined herself as someone's daughter, at first subconsciously, and then her imagination became increasingly vivid. Throughout the years, other children were adopted from the orphanage, but no one wanted to make Hope part of their family. With each visit of potential parents, her dream of being adopted faded. After all, Babies are more likely to be adopted, and she is already 10 years old. One day, there was a family who wanted to adopt Hope. She could not contain her joy. She thought, finally, she will be loved. However, it turned out that life outside the orphanage was not at all what Hope imagined it would be. She felt like an outsider in the world of her foster mother and her husband. Hope was treated like a piece of furniture, deprived of human care and love. The girl tried her best to be good, obedient, the way she needed to be. But her foster parents never responded how she wanted. Hope was ready to continue living with them, just to be part of the family, but her foster parents decided against keeping her. A year later, they decided they no longer needed Hope, and now the 11-year-old orphan was cast aside once again. Hope returned to the orphanage, unwanted and unloved. She began to wonder, will she be able to recover the deep betrayal she has experienced in life? Will she believe in the goodness of people again? Will she experience love? Hope looked out the window as her foster mother left, and big tears streamed down her face. Wiping them with her small palm, she did not understand why she had been abandoned twice already in her short life. Her own mother, who was supposed to love her, had betrayed her the first time. This time, when it seemed to Hope that life was improving, she thought she was going to have a real family. Hope's now former foster mother disappeared around the corner without even looking back, even once. Hope watched her leave, and with a sinking heart, she hoped that her foster mother would change her mind. "Don't worry, it's a part of life," said a familiar voice behind her. It was Mike, Hope's best friend. Mike was 3 years older than Hope, and, just like her, got into an orphanage in very early childhood, but there was a significant difference in his story, as Hope herself believed. His parents died, so he ended up in the orphanage. Clinging to Mike, Hope gave in to her emotions and cried as hard as she could. Mike ran his fingers through her hair in silence, letting her grieve. "You will cause a flood if you don't calm down, and then we will definitely get in trouble with Miss Ruth," Mike joked, gently wiping tears from her face. "Hope, don't be offended, but I'm sort of glad that it happened, because now we will be together like we were before," he said as he winked at her. Hope missed Mike while she was away, but she did not want to be reunited under these circumstances. This was her last chance to find a family, albeit a foster one. All children in the orphanage clearly understood that preference is given as a rule to young children under 5 years old. Teenagers are the least wanted. Hope was already 11 years old. She was already incredibly lucky to have been fostered a year ago, but her foster mother could not accept her, even though she tried her best to be loved. "Mike, you go. I need to be alone right now," she said quietly to her friend. He nodded understandingly and left. Hope lay down on the bed. There were no more tears. Now she felt only emptiness and indifference to everything. Reflecting on her life, Hope did not understand why some children got everything: loving, caring parents, brothers and sisters, grandparents, holidays with big family gatherings, and other children got nothing except to live under the government's roof with strangers all around. Hope wondered how someone could give up their child and not think about them again. She didn't know the answer, but she hoped that her mother had a good reason for abandoning her and that they would meet again someday. One thing she knew for sure was that she would never give up her child. She would never want her child to experience what she had. When dinner service was called, Hope stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling. There was a soft knock on the door, and a moment later, Miss Ruth appeared in the doorway. When she saw Hope, she sat down on the edge of the bed and comforted her. "Baby, don't tear your soul out. It's not about you. You know there are people who come here like it's a toy store. First they take one, and then they throw it away when they get tired of it. I know that it's very painful and hurtful for you right now, but life goes on. We need to forgive and move on. There will be many more unpleasant moments in life, and you must be prepared for them," Miss Ruth said, voice trembling as she spoke. Miss Ruth barely held back her tears now. In general, she was an incredibly kind woman who treated all children with all her heart. She didn't have her own, so she gave them all the warmth, feeling sympathy for absolutely everyone. The children were also drawn to her and loved the eternally smiling woman very much. Hope looked at Miss Ruth and suddenly asked, "Miss Ruth, do you know the reason why my mom gave up on me?" "Does it matter, my dear?" Miss Ruth replied warily. "I just want to know. Maybe there is a reason. Maybe something happened that she made her want to give me up. You've been working here all your life. Do you remember how I got here?" Hope looked so optimistic that a shiver ran down Miss Ruth's spine. "Hope, honey, I'm sorry. I don't know the details," she said. She couldn't look Hope in the eyes as she remembered how she personally took baby Hope from her mother's arms, trying to dissuade her. But she did not want to listen to anything. Hope's mother could only say that the baby had ruined her life, but Miss Ruth would never tell Hope the truth. Hope noticed tears rolling from Miss Ruth's eyes. "Miss Ruth, are you crying? Don't, please," Hope said and hugged the woman. "How can I not cry? Because my soul aches for each of you," Miss Ruth replied. "But there are so many of us, and you have one soul. Let's both calm down and not cry anymore," Hope suggested. When Hope came downstairs for dinner, she spotted Mike coming toward her, and he whisked her around the room. Life in the orphanage continued for Hope. It was time to say goodbye to Mike, the best friend she ever had. Mike had turned 18, which meant that it was time for him to live an independent life. As expected, he received housing from the state and joined the army. He regularly wrote letters to his true love, Hope. Childhood friendship had gradually developed into a youthful infatuation, so everyone considered them a couple. After serving his contracted time, Mike had not forgotten about Hope. On the contrary, he regularly visited her. Hope anticipated his visits with a joyous heart because she had never been as close to someone as she was to Mike. Shortly before Hope graduated, the headmaster of the orphanage wanted to speak with her. Hope thought that it was about her finding a potential home, but she was mistaken. An unknown man was waiting for her in the office. "Hope, this man came on behalf of your grandmother," the manager, Mrs. Douglas, began carefully. "The woman does not have long left. She is in the hospital and would very much like to see you." Hope had a grandmother? But how was this possible? Hope was confused. "If you agree to go to the hospital with me, you will find out for yourself," the man said. Hope nodded. Miss Ruth accompanied the pair, apprehensive about leaving Hope with an unknown man. Entering the ward, Hope saw an incredibly old woman who had medical tubes and devices connected all over her body. "You wanted to see me?" Hope asked quietly, carefully examining the woman. "Are you Hope Mortense?" the woman asked. "Yes," Hope replied, but she was so confused. "Call my lawyer," the woman ordered. Once her lawyer arrived, she continued the conversation. "I'm your paternal grandmother. Unfortunately, my husband and son left too soon. Now it's my turn. You're the only one left in our family, so after I leave, I bequeath you everything I have, a big house and a decent bank account. All this will be issued in your name," the woman said as she motioned to her lawyer to present the official signed documents. She turned away from Hope to look out the window. "Is that all?" Hope wondered aloud. "Trust me, it's not that small. Or did you want something else?" the old woman said, grinning. "You haven't seen me once in your life, and don't even want to ask how I lived," Hope said. "I would like to know at least something from my life," Hope said indignantly. "Okay, I'll tell you, but after that you'll leave right away. I'm already very tired," the woman said with irritation in her voice. "When your mother found out she was expecting a baby, my son was only 22 years old. He wanted to get married, but I forbade him, threatening to deprive him of everything if he did. Your mother dreamed of marrying a rich guy, So when he left her, she decided to abandon you. She only needed you to get a goal. My son moved abroad and got married, but there were no children in that marriage. 5 years ago, he died in an accident with his wife. My husband died almost immediately after, suffering a heart attack. I found you, although it wasn't difficult at all. That's the whole story. Now go away. I sincerely feel sorry for you, Hope said through tears. You don't know what it means to love, because even now you are only worried about your money. After a long pause, Hope said goodbye and left the room. After Hope's graduation, Hope and Mike decided to live together in the same house that Hope had inherited. They decided to donate the money to the orphanage where they both grew up. As time passed, Hope and Mike got married and were looking forward to welcoming their first baby. Hope made lunch and escorted her husband back to work so she could get some fresh air. Suddenly, Hope ran into a strange woman at the gate. "Can you tell me if Hope Mortense lives in this house?" she asked Hope. "She does. It's me. That's my maiden name." "What did you want?" Hope asked curiously. Looking into the woman's eyes, Hope had to suddenly catch her breath. She knew who was standing in front of her. "My daughter! I finally found you!" The woman screamed and rushed to hug Hope. Hope could not believe her eyes, but she invited her mother into the house. After pouring the tea into the cups, Hope sat down opposite her mother and asked, looking into her eyes, "Why did you abandon me?" Her mother replied, "You see, daughter, your father left me when he found out that I was expecting a child. His mother insisted on it, and I didn't have anything to feed you. But let's not talk about the bad. We're together now. You know you have a younger brother, and he really wants to see you. Do you mind?" Hope's mother asked. "Yes, of course, I'll meet him," Hope replied absently. Hope had two thoughts on her mind at that moment. On the one hand, she was glad that her mother had found her, but on the other hand, it all seemed very strange. Hope's mother soon left, promising to come to visit next weekend, but with her brother. In the evening, Hope's husband returned from work, and she told him about the unexpected visit. "You dreamed of finding your mom, and now you're not happy about it at all?" Mike asked gently. "Yes, I have replayed our meeting with her thousands of times in my head, but everything did not happen at all as I thought. She didn't even ask for forgiveness for leaving me, and didn't ask at all how I had been living all this time. The conversations were only about her and my brother," Hope replied sadly. "Don't worry, let them come by this weekend. Let's try to find out what she needs and why she actually found you," Mike said. All week, the young woman suffered in anticipation of the unknown. She decided to invite Miss Ruth to dinner because Hope and Mike had continued to maintain a relationship with her over the years. When the weekend came, the doorbell rang, and Hope saw her mother and a young man who resembled Hope. "Meet Nick, your brother," the woman introduced the young man. Nick gave the impression of a modest and shy guy and immediately liked Hope. Glancing at Miss Ruth, who was present at the table, her mother tensed and made a displeased look, which did not go unnoticed. "And what is this woman doing here?" Hope's mother asked, pointing to Miss Ruth. "This woman was like a mother to us, sat with us when we were sick, calmed us down when we were sick, shared the joys with us," Mike quipped. "Excuse me, how can I address you?" he asked. "Megan," Hope's mother hissed. "Here, daughter, your brother will soon be studying near you, so you can see each other often. However, it's so expensive to rent an apartment, I'm afraid I won't be able to help. Maybe you'll take him in? We're not strangers after all," trying to hold on direct eye contact, Megan said, looking at her daughter. "Excuse me, Megan. I was wondering how you got your daughter's address," Miss Ruth asked. "So the newspaper wrote that this house went to an unknown granddaughter of the former owners," Megan said, and stopped. "And what is the age difference between Hope and Nick?" Mike continued his questions. 2 years. Why?" Megan's face turned crimson. Hope watched in silence. "Because of the fact that 2 years after you abandoned Hope, you gave birth again. So you had housing and funds, but you didn't even think to return for your daughter. And I don't have to imagine that you were looking for her. You found out she had received a good inheritance and decided to get something out of it. That's clear. Stop playing games, Mike told her. And who are you to tell me off? Megan screamed. It's her brother. She has to help him. And anyway, if she hadn't been born to me, her life wouldn't have turned out differently, she persisted. Nick took his mother's arm and tried to lead her to the door, but she did not stop pouring insults at Hope. Tears rolled from Hope's eyes, so Miss Ruth hurried her into the bedroom and told her to sit on the bed. Why is she doing this to me? She doesn't need me at all, she whispered. Calm down, baby. It will be okay, Miss Ruth reassured her. When Mike finally managed to get the guests out of the house, Miss Ruth was already calling an ambulance. The stress of it all had caused Hope to go into labor. At the hospital, Hope gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Hope looked into her daughter's face, realized that she would never be able to part with her. Hope cut Megan out of her life. Although she tried to establish contact several times, but Hope maintained a friendly relationship with her brother. Hope and Mike invited Miss Ruth to live with them and help with the baby, which Miss Ruth agreed to and was incredibly happy about. In the end, Hope and Mike became the best parents for their little girl.